Ethan Parker tightened his grip on the steering wheel as his old pickup truck rumbled down the narrow road leading into town. Snow had started falling again. Thick flakes hit the windshield and dissolved instantly under the wipers. The sky was gray. Heavy. The kind of gray that meant something worse was coming. The radio buzzed with static before the local announcer broke through. This is a severe weather alert. Blizzard conditions expected tonight across the region. All residents are advised to stay indoors and prepare for extended power outages. Ethan let out a long breath. Of course it had to be tonight. He was already low on supplies. Just 2 days ago, he had moved into his grandfather's old cabin on the edge of town, trying to get his life together after the divorce. No internet. No neighbors in sight. Just him and a cold cabin that creaked too much at night. By the time he reached the gas station, the snow was falling harder. A few people were inside grabbing essentials. He pushed open the door and felt the dry heat of the heater blast against his face. "Ethan," a voice called. He turned to see Abby Monroe, bundled up in a blue coat, holding a basket of canned food. She smiled, but there was something tired in her eyes. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said. "Storm's coming in fast," Ethan replied. "Figured I'd grab a few things before it gets bad." Abby nodded. "Yeah. I've got a double shift at the clinic tonight. Looks like we'll be stuck there until morning." Ethan paid for his supplies and headed back outside. As he was loading his truck, a voice startled him from behind. "You make sure you keep them lights off after midnight." It was Tom Willis. Gray beard, thick jacket, old shotgun slung over his back like always. He lived alone 2 plots over from Ethan. "Why is that?" Ethan asked, half laughing. Tom didn't smile. "Because they come for the ones that shine. Always have." Then he walked off without another word, boots crunching in the snow. Back in the truck, Ethan brushed it off. Tom had always been strange. Living alone in the woods did that to a man. Still, the warning lingered in his mind as he pulled into his long, empty driveway. The forest loomed dark behind the cabin. Snow was already piling against the porch. By 8, the wind had started howling. By 9, the power went out. The cabin fell into silence, broken only by the wind rattling the windows. Ethan lit a few candles and sat near the fireplace. Shadows danced on the walls. He tried to read. Tried to ignore the cold creeping in under the door. Then, sometime after midnight, someone knocked. A soft, slow knock. He froze. 3 knocks. No voice. Just that dull sound against the wooden door. He got up, heart racing, and slowly pulled it open. No one was there. Only the sound of the wind, the trees creaking, and in the fresh snow on the porch, a trail of bare footprints. They led away from the cabin, into the woods. Ethan stood in the doorway, staring at the footprints. They were small, human, and completely bare. No shoes, no socks. The skin had pressed into the snow with terrifying clarity. Those heels, even the arch. He leaned out slightly, squinting into the woods. But there was no one. Just the howl of wind and the faint rustle of pine branches swaying under snow. He stepped back inside, locked the door, and stood in silence. The fire crackled behind him. The wind hissed through a crack in the window frame. Maybe it was a prank. A dumb one. But who would be out here this late, barefoot, in a snowstorm? Ethan didn't sleep that night. When morning came, the world outside was white. Buried. The snow had nearly covered the footprints, but he could still see their direction. Toward the woods. Toward the tree line that separated his property from nothing but endless forest. By noon, he drove back into town. The main road had been plowed, barely. Snowbanks stood like frozen walls. At the gas station, he ran into Abby again. She looked pale, shivering despite the layers she wore. "You all right?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Didn't get much sleep." "Me neither." She tilted her head. "Something happen?" Ethan looked around. An older couple walked past them. A kid scraped snow off the windshield nearby. I had someone knock on my door last night, he said quietly. Middle of the storm. When I opened it, there were footprints. Bare feet. No one around. Abby's face didn't change. She just stared at him. Then, slowly, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a scarf. Blue and gray. Thin. This yours? She asked. Ethan shook his head. No. I found it stuck on the fence outside the clinic this morning. I thought maybe someone dropped it last night, but... She trailed off. Ethan took the scarf, examined it. Frozen stiff. Small bloodstains on the edge. He looked back up at her. You were there all night? She nodded. Didn't leave. They went straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Dana Brooks was leaning back in her chair, feet on the desk, a coffee steaming in her hand. Footprints, she repeated. In a storm like last night? Could have been melting patterns. Could have been animal tracks. They were human, Ethan said. Dana glanced at Abby, who nodded. I found this. She placed the scarf on the desk. The sheriff studied it in silence. Then she said, this happens every few winters. Somebody always hears something. Sees something. Then someone ends up missing. Abby frowned. You think this is connected to other cases? Dana sighed. I think this town gets too quiet when it snows. And people hear things in the quiet. But I'll file a report. As they left the office, Tom was waiting outside. His face red from the cold. Eyes alert, jittery. You followed the tracks, didn't you? He asked Ethan. Ethan didn't answer. Tom stepped closer. You're lucky they didn't lead you all the way in. In where? Ethan asked. Tom leaned in. His voice was almost a whisper. Where the trees breathe. Where the snow remembers. Then he turned and walked away. The snow kept falling. By nightfall, the town was swallowed in white again. Thick layers clung to rooftops and telephone wires. Power lines sagged. Streetlights buzzed and flickered like they were trying to hold on. Ethan lit his fireplace early. He didn't want to be caught in the dark again. Outside, the wind moaned against the trees, a constant low hum that never seemed to stop. Every so often he thought he heard something else in it. A voice. Just under the pitch of the wind. He turned the volume up on the radio, but it only made things worse. Static. A hiss. Then, just barely words. Help me. Ethan froze. He leaned closer to the speaker. Please. Still out here? The voice cut in and out like it was underwater. Then silence. Then only the sound of wind again. He ripped the cord from the outlet. The room went quiet. The voice was gone. Across town, Abby was alone in the clinic. The building was nearly empty that night, just one elderly patient sleeping in room 2, sedated and stable. She had been cleaning out a cabinet when she heard the hallway intercom crackle. She walked to the front desk and stared at the old wall-mounted speaker. It buzzed faintly. Then a voice came through. I'm cold. Abby stepped back. The voice was distant. And not coming from any room in the clinic. Open the door, please. She checked the security monitors. All clear. Just snow outside. No one at the entrance. No cars on the street. She checked room 2. The old man hadn't moved. Then she saw it. On the feed for the emergency exit door, something was standing outside. Wearing a thin shirt soaked in snow. It faced the camera but had no eyes. Just sunken holes where they should have been. Then the screen glitched. And the figure was gone. At the same time, Ethan was walking through his cabin, flashlight in hand. Something was thumping beneath the floor. Soft, rhythmic, like footsteps. He crouched near the edge of the rug and listened. The floorboard was cold under his hand. The thumping stopped. Then came a scrape. Long and slow. Like nails on wood. He backed away. The lights flickered once, then went out. Complete darkness. He stood still, listening to the wind, the creaks, the silence. Then his phone buzzed. It was a voicemail. From Tom. He played it. First came static. Then Tom's voice. Whispering. They're not human. They were the cold like skin. I saw it, in the trees. They whispered to me. A loud crash cut him off. then screaming, then something wet and heavy, dragging. Then nothing. The message ended. Ethan didn't sleep that night, either. Morning came slowly, with gray light seeping through frost-covered windows. Ethan hadn't moved from his chair by the fireplace. The cold had crept into the walls. Even with the fire burning, the cabin felt hollow, like something inside had gone quiet. He replayed Tom's voicemail over and over. Each time, the background noises seemed louder, clearer. A wet dragging sound, breathing, and something whispering, right before the end, something that didn't sound like a voice at all. He had to check on Tom. By noon, the wind had eased just enough for Ethan to drive. The roads were buried, but his truck managed the short distance between properties. Tom's cabin sat at the edge of the woods, its roof weighed down by snow. Ethan knocked twice. No answer. He pushed the door open. It creaked. Inside, the heat was gone. The stove had burned out. The floor was soaked, not with water, but with melted snow. It stretched in patches across the living room, leading in strange trails toward the hallway. Ethan stepped in carefully. The floor groaned beneath his boots. Tom. Silence. There were no signs of forced entry. No broken glass. No open windows. But snow had somehow blown across the furniture. It dusted the couch, the bookshelf, even the deer head mounted above the fireplace. And then he saw them. Claw marks. Long, uneven grooves etched deep into the inside of the front door. Not from the outside, from within. Ethan backed away slowly. Later that evening, Abby stood near the clinic's second-floor window, watching the snow spiral under the streetlights. She hadn't told anyone about what she saw on the monitor last night. Not yet. She didn't want to sound crazy. But something wasn't right. As she turned away from the glass, she heard it again. Scratching. Coming from the ceiling tiles above the hallway. She climbed onto the counter, pushed open the nearest panel, and shined her phone light inside. Nothing. Just dust, wires, and movement. A pale hand reached up from the darkness and slammed the tile shut from the inside. Abby stumbled backward, heart slamming in her chest. Downstairs, the emergency radio clicked on again. A voice whispered, "You saw me." She ran to the desk, yanked the plug from the wall. The whispering didn't stop. It was coming from behind her now. At the same time, Ethan returned to his cabin. The sky was black. Snow falling again. He pulled into the driveway and noticed something odd. His cabin door was open. Wide open. He stepped out of the truck, flashlight raised, and approached slowly. Inside, the fire had died out. The room was freezing. His boots left deep prints in the soft snow that now covered the floor. It looked like it had fallen inside, like gravity had been reversed. Like the storm had seeped through the ceiling. He followed the trail into the kitchen, then stopped. On the far wall, something had been scratched into the wood with what looked like fingernails. They live under the silence. Ethan didn't remember falling asleep, but he woke up in the early hours of the morning, wrapped in a blanket on the living room floor. The fire had long since died. The cabin was dark, silent except for the occasional snap of timber settling in the cold. He sat up slowly. The writing was still there on the kitchen wall. He tried to scrub it with hot water and bleach, but the words wouldn't come off. Not fully. They stayed faint, like something burned into the wood from inside. They live under the silence. He hadn't dreamed those words. Hadn't imagined the voice on the radio or the footprints. But the longer he stayed, the more it felt like the world outside was slipping away. Or maybe he was. His phone had no signal. The landline was dead. And Tom still hadn't answered. At dawn, he stepped outside. Fresh snow had fallen in the night, covering everything. The trees surrounding the cabin looked like statues. Heavy. Still. Then he saw them again. Footprints. But human. Leading out from his front porch, not in. Like someone had been inside and left. He followed the trail. Step by step, they led him through the trees, past the old fence line, deeper than he usually walked. The cold bit at his face, but he kept going. There was no sound. Not even birds. Then the trees began to thin, and he saw it. A clearing. And in the center, a hole. Perfectly round. About 6 feet across. carved straight through the snow and earth as if it had always been there. No tools. No signs of digging. Just a pit in the middle of the forest. And from it, steam. Warm air drifted upward, mixing with the cold like breath. Ethan stepped closer. There was a sound coming from inside. Faint. Garbled. Whispers. He leaned in. Couldn't make out words, only tones. Like many voices speaking over one another, buried deep beneath the earth. He backed away slowly. Then, a noise behind him. He spun around. No one. But a tree branch had snapped. Snow was falling off it in chunks. He turned back toward the hole. The footprints were gone. Completely vanished. Not covered. Just gone. Back in town, Abby locked the clinic doors early. She'd been seeing things again. Shapes outside windows, lights flickering when no one touched the switches, voices from rooms that should have been empty. And the scarf? It was gone. She had left it sealed in a plastic bag in the supply closet. This morning, the bag was still there, torn open. The scarf had vanished. And where it had rested, water. Pale, reddish water. She didn't tell anyone. Not yet. That night, as snow hammered the streets and trees groaned beneath the weight, both Ethan and Abby heard the same thing at the same time, in two different places. Knocking. Slow. Rhythmic. From the walls. Not the doors. Not the windows. From within the walls. As if something was waiting inside the house itself. Ethan pressed his ear against the wall. There it was again. 3 knocks. Slow. Deliberate. Followed by silence. Then breathing. Faint and steady, as though someone were inside the very structure of the cabin. Not on the other side, within. He backed away, flashlight trembling in his hand. The cabin felt different now. He could feel it in his chest, like the air itself was pushing back against him. He walked from room to room, checking every wall, every vent, every crawl space. Nothing. But the sound followed him. Every time he stopped, it started again. Knock, knock, knock. From a different wall. A different angle. A different place. He ran out into the snow, breath steaming in the freezing air. The wind had died down, leaving a heavy stillness behind. Everything around him was covered in white. And everything was wrongly quiet. No birds. No branches moving. No sound of distant cars or creaking trees. Just stillness. He stood there, alone in the clearing, the warmth from his panic fogging his glasses. Then behind him, footsteps. Turned. A figure stood just at the edge of the woods. Covered in ice. Not moving. Its head tilted to the side as if curious. Then gone. Like it had been erased from reality. Ethan stumbled back inside and slammed the door. Meanwhile, at the clinic, Abby had taken refuge in the basement supply room, where the concrete walls felt safer than the empty rooms above. She'd brought down a cot, a flashlight, and a small heater. She hadn't slept in over 24 hours. Her hands shook as she read through the old emergency logs. One entry caught her eye, dated January 1997. Patient arrived frostbitten, claiming voices called from the trees. Left alone for 5 minutes, vanished from locked room. Floor wet. Room freezing. The name of the patient was blacked out. Another file, older, noted a collapsed girl found in the woods with no shoes, whispering the same phrase over and over again. It lives beneath the snow. It wears your name. Abby slammed the folder shut. She turned toward the stairs. Water. A thin line of water was running slowly down one step at a time, from the floor above. It was pale, tinted faint red. She followed it cautiously. On the main floor, every light had gone out except one, the hallway light flickering just outside room 2. She stepped toward it. Inside, the bed was empty. The sheets were soaked in water. The floorboards were damp beneath her shoes. On the far wall, written in something dark and frozen, were 4 words. It has found you. The power went out completely. In the distance, from somewhere unseen, she heard her own voice whisper, "Let me in." Ethan didn't go back to sleep. He stayed by the fire, shotgun in his lap, waiting for the sound to return. But it didn't. Not that night. Not until the sky started to lighten again. Not until the silence of dawn settled into his bones like cold iron. He needed answers. He packed a bag, grabbed his coat, and drove straight into town. The roads were worse now, nearly impassable, but he made it barely. At the sheriff's office, the windows were dark. The parking lot was empty. The front door creaked open when he pushed it, unlocked. Inside, a single desk lamp flickered. No one there. The coffee pot was still warm. A coat hung by the door. But Dana Brooks was gone. Ethan checked every room, calling her name. Nothing. Only a low humming sound, barely audible, like wind trapped in a metal pipe. It followed him through the halls. Then he reached her office. The window was shattered from the inside. And on the floor, more footprints. What? Leading straight across the room to the back wall. Where someone had written. She opened the door. We took her in. Ethan stumbled back, nearly slipping. Across town, Abby was trying to reach him. Her phone was dead. No landline. No internet. Just a growing cold that hadn't lifted in 2 days. She tried the radio again. Static. Then, a voice. This time it was hers. Her own voice on the frequency, whispering her name again and again. Abby. Abby. She pulled the plug from the wall, but the voice didn't stop. It grew louder. Clear. Begging. I'm still outside. She screamed and ran out into the snow, desperate for anyone, any sign of life. On Main Street, most of the shops were closed, darkened behind sheets of ice. But there was one place with light, the Hollow Pine, a tiny bar near the edge of town. She pushed the door open. Inside were 5 people. All of them sitting silently, backs straight, eyes hollow. A candle flickered on each table. Tom was among them. He looked up at her. His face pale. Lips cracked. Eyes. Wrong. You came, he said. You stayed. What is this? She whispered. They remember, he said softly. They remember who left. Who forgot. Who built their homes on top of graves. He stood slowly. Took something from his coat pocket. A photograph. Grainy. A group of people standing near the woods, all smiling. She recognized one of them. Her grandfather. Beneath it, scrawled in faded ink. The last ones who heard them. Tom stepped forward. They live under the white. Beneath us. Waiting for the ones who listen. Abby backed away toward the door. They've already chosen, he said. The candlelight flickered. Then every light went out. In Ethan's truck, halfway back from the sheriff's office, the engine sputtered and died. The dashboard went dark. Outside, the snow fell heavier than before, as though it wasn't falling from the sky, but rising from the ground. He opened the door. Silence. A scream. Distant. Carried on the wind like a blade. He ran. Toward the sound. Toward the edge of the trees. The scream faded as Ethan charged into the forest, his boots crunching through the deep snow, breath clouding in thick, uneven bursts. The trees closed in around him. Everything looked the same, white and endless, but he kept running, guided by instinct more than direction. Branches scraped his face. Ice clung to his lashes. He couldn't hear anything but his own heartbeat and the snow beneath his feet. Then he saw it. A break in the trees. Trail, fresh footprints. Bare, human, impossibly deep, leading toward the hill behind the old ranger station. The same place he and Tom used to hike when they were teenagers. He followed them. The trees thinned. The air grew colder, sharp and metallic, as if the oxygen had been stripped of life. His breath turned to needles in his lungs. At the top of the hill stood a wooden structure. The fire tower. Abandoned for years. But tonight, its light was on. Flickering. He climbed the stairs, one frozen step at a time. The wind howled around the structure, but inside, stillness. At the top, the door was slightly open. He stepped in. Tom sat in the corner. Shivering. Whispering. There's nothing up here, Ethan said, his voice cracking from the cold. Tom looked up slowly. It's not what's up here, he said. It's what's below. Then Ethan saw it. The floorboards near Tom had been pried open. A black hole yawned beneath the tower. It wasn't part of the original structure. It shouldn't have been there. A tunnel. Dug into the earth. Pitch black. From within, a sound rose. Breathing. Whispering. like hundreds of voices murmuring behind the walls of the world. Ethan backed away. But something had already climbed halfway up from the darkness. It wasn't fully visible. Just shapes. Wet skin that glistened like melting frost. A mouth that didn't smile but stretched. Tom looked at Ethan and whispered, "Don't run. Running makes it real." Ethan bolted. He didn't hear footsteps behind him, but he didn't have to. The air changed. The cold grew alive. The trees began to twist, like they were leaning toward him, like they were reaching. He ran until he could no longer feel his legs. And when he reached the road again, his truck was gone. Back at the hollow pine, Abby was hiding in the back room. The people inside the bar hadn't moved in nearly an hour. They sat there, unmoving, their skin growing pale, their clothes soaked without any visible water source. She held her phone like a weapon, even though it had long since died. Then a noise. Scratching. From behind the supply shelf. She moved it aside and found a crawlspace door, barely visible behind old boxes and dust. She shouldn't have opened it. But she did. Behind it was a narrow passage, descending into black earth. A rope ladder. A draft of wind that smelled like rotten winter. And faintly, so faintly, it whispered her name. Abby. Someone had been down there. Someone was still down there. The rope ladder creaked under Abby's weight. She hesitated only once, when her feet left the solid floor and dipped into the dark. But the voice kept calling her name, soft and steady, like a memory she couldn't quite place. Abby. The air grew colder the deeper she descended. The narrow shaft was lined with stone, damp with frost, and it smelled of earth sealed away for decades. At the bottom, her flashlight flickered, catching the glint of something wet coating the walls. The passage opened into a narrow tunnel. There were markings on the stone. Carvings. Words scratched deep into the rock. So many names. Most faded beyond recognition, but a few were still visible. Sarah Colden, 1931. Robert H. Ellis, 1959. Clara Mayfield, 1982. And one name that stopped her breath. Eleanor Grant, 1993. Her mother. Abby froze. Her mother had died in a car accident when Abby was 8. At least, that's what she'd always been told. The name carved into the wall, her handwriting. Abby knew it. Beneath it, a single word scratched hastily. Opened. From deeper in the tunnel came a sound, something between breathing and the rumble of shifting earth. Abby moved forward, slowly, flashlight trembling in her grip. At the far end she found the chamber. Circular. Carved into the ground like an ancient cellar. In the center, a hole. The pulsed. Not visually, but audibly. With a deep, low throb. Like a heartbeat in the soil. Surrounding it were dozens of objects, laid out like offerings. Scarves, watches, broken phones, shoes. All frozen. All rotting. And voices. They didn't come from any one direction. They came from all around her. You heard us. You stayed. We never left. Abby turned to run, but the tunnel behind her had changed. No longer straight. Now curved. Twisting. Endless. In the forest, Ethan wandered through snow he no longer recognized. The trail was gone. Every direction looked the same. The wind was whispering again, not like air, but like language. He heard his name. Not once. Over and over. And each time, it sounded closer. He stumbled into another clearing. Another hole. This one smaller. Fresh. Still steaming. He dropped to his knees, peering into the black. Movement. Something crawling up. Not fast. Slow. Like it wasn't in a hurry. Like it knew he wasn't going anywhere. Ethan stood, backed away, then turned and ran. Branches whipped his face. Ice tore at his skin. The forest seemed to close in as he ran. Finally, in the distance, a building. The hollow pine. He sprinted toward it, boots slipping on ice. He burst through the door, gasping, and froze. No one inside. Just candles. Still burning. Just silence. He called out. Abby. Nothing. Then, from behind the bar, a whisper. You're too late. The whisper was unmistakable, Abby's voice. But softer. Slower. warped by something that no longer sounded human. Ethan turned toward the sound, heart thudding, the candlelight trembling on the bar's polished wood. "Abby?" he called again. No answer. He stepped behind the bar. The trapdoor to the crawlspace was open. A draft of frozen air poured from below, carrying the scent of earth, rot, and something older, something that didn't belong in the world above. He climbed down. The rope ladder groaned under his weight, ice clinging to each rung. The stone tunnel at the bottom felt like a tomb. The flashlight in his hand flickered, then failed. Darkness. Total. He paused, holding his breath. Then, footsteps. Not his. Light, bare and slow. Something moved through the tunnel, just beyond sight. He pressed his back to the wall, holding still, afraid even to blink. A figure passed by. It wasn't Abby. It had once been human, but its skin now shimmered with frost, its fingers too long, its mouth frozen open in a silent scream. Its eyes voids. Empty. Staring forward as it glided past him like it couldn't see him, or chose not to. He waited until it was gone. Then he followed. Deeper into the tunnel. Back in the chamber, Abby stood at the edge of the hole. She didn't know how long she had been there. Time didn't work the same way down here. The whispers had grown stronger. Louder. They were inside her now. At her feet the items had changed. Now they were familiar. Ethan's keys. His boots. His coat. She didn't remember bringing them. The voices grew frantic. You remember now. You opened it too. You heard the call. She backed away, but the tunnel was gone. Only walls. Only ice. Then, a voice behind her. Abby. She turned. Ethan stood at the threshold of the chamber, his face pale, eyes wild. He took a step forward. She stepped back. No, she whispered. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, he said, voice trembling. They won't let us go. The hole pulsed once more. The ground shook. The walls cracked. From the pit, the things began to rise. Dozens of them. Skin like permafrost. Mouths gaping, silent. Some looked like townsfolk. Others wore nothing at all. Some had no faces. They didn't run. Ethan grabbed Abby's hand. Don't look, he whispered. They turned. Friend. The tunnel twisted beneath their feet. The walls bled frozen water. Their breaths came in ragged gasps. Behind them, nothing. But everything. At the base of the ladder, the light returned. A warm glow spilling from the open trapdoor above. They climbed, desperate, slipping on the frost-slick rungs. As Ethan reached the top, something grabbed his foot. Ice-cold fingers. He kicked. It screamed, a sound like breaking glass, and let go. They tumbled into the back room of the bar. Slammed the trapdoor shut. And everything below fell silent. The candlelight flickered around them. Outside, the first light of morning broke over the snow-covered town. But the streets were empty. No cars. No footprints. Only white. Endless white. They sat in silence. Breathing. Shivering. Knowing the truth. The cold hadn't come from the storm. It had always been here. Waiting. Listening. And now, it remembered their names.